Hey guys, today I'm going to be painting Lumpy from Stuffed Fables. This is the third character I will be painting. Then my next painting video will be a Rising Sun miniature, so if you're looking forward to that, then just sit tight and I'll get to that pretty shortly here. Now, Lumpy's pretty interesting just because he's a very simple miniature, but in the story at least, I figured he'd be more of an Igor character, but he's really just avoiding any conflict. I think his first lines are literally, "Can we just pay somebody to do this for us?" So that's kind of an interesting thing. Anyway, I'm going to get right into it. Just note that this will be a little bit of a longer video. I asked some feedback from you guys about whether you want a shorter video or longer video, and unanimously, everybody said that they want a longer video. So without further ado, here is a lengthier video on Lumpy. Starting out, as always, we are dealing with the mold lines. Now, I said on the other two that they had really bad mold lines. That was Floppy and Theodora. Now, Lumpy is not nearly as bad. In fact, he is quite good. I think the only one that was better than him was Stitch. They are still here, though it's easily managed and really regulated to the tops and sides, which is a little bit better. If you remember, Theodora had one stretching across her entire stomach. He just has some kind of on the side of his stomach. That's probably the most Agrax one. This is just to show you how long this takes in real time and just how careful I need to be. And the reason I'm trying to be that careful is just because with this, how smooth and round these features are, I don't really have like an armor plating or the edge of a cape I can use to kind of excuse a hard line. And so this has to be really smooth and really careful. So you saw me kind of rubbing my finger across there and really just trying to make sure that once I add paint, it doesn't look worse. And instead I would like it to look better when I add paint. So again, just feeling it and going along the side. All around though, not too big of a deal. Was actually fairly easy and quick, especially compared to the other ones. Alright, and I am going to prime it in gray. I tend to like gray, but beginners should probably do black. Administratum gray is my choice. Now, I've seen a lot of people paint him gray. I've seen a lot of people paint him kind of a blue. I think the blue is more of a lighting and mood thing, and so I'm trying to paint him closer to what I think he actually would be, and I think he's a gray elephant. Either one's fine, though. Also, he has a blue shirt, and I don't want too much blue. I wanted some kind of color contrast, and I think it makes his shirt pop out a lot more, which is kind of nice. For painting this, if you notice, I did really long strokes. I try to not stop the brush too much on those big pieces, just because otherwise you're going to get a lot of texture in the paint that you don't want, even thinned down as much as it is. Next up we have Administratum Gray and Nuln Oil, and that's a 4-to-1 with a lot more Administratum Gray. That little bit of Nuln Oil I used to water the paint down, so I didn't add any water to this. You see how watery that is? That's just from the Nuln Oil. What this does is not only water down my paint, but it slightly tints it a little bit, adding a little bit of Nuln Oil. When you have a smooth surface area like this, you can't just add shade, you'll just get brush marks. All the time, guaranteed. There's not really any way around it. But if you add it to the paint, you shift it a little bit to that darker color, but you can paint it on, and so that's what I'm doing here. So I'm just adding it to the ridges underneath his head and his arms and his stomach and his back and just really all the areas, and then in just a little bit I'm going to show you how I feather it out. Okay, so right here, I'm taking it and just bringing it ever so slightly and very small strokes out towards the regular paint. And this is what I refer to as feathering, and it really just helps blend it in. This is not a wet blend, though it is kind of similar to how you would wet blend, but only in one direction. And so you're just bringing the paint ever so slightly out. Next up is just a little bit of white added to the Administratum Gray, the normal Administratum Gray, not with the Nuln Oil. This is for a highlight. Again, long, even strokes anywhere there's a big area like that. And so just a little bit, kind of on the opposite of where I feathered out the highlight. And then on the head, it's going to be a much larger one. And then I'm going to have a heavy highlight on the ears, which we'll see in just a moment. Okay, and here's that heavy highlight. So I'm taking quite a lot more than normal on my brush. You can see it's almost to the ferrule there. And I'm just putting it on the very tops here. And notice it pooled in the middle because it is still a little watery. And so I'm going to fix that by getting my brush wet and then brushing it in there and getting it wet again after drying it off. We're putting it in there again. It doesn't take very long. This is real time, and it just soaks up that paint in there just enough to where I can leave it alone after that. And now we're moving on to flat blue. This is just kind of a straight up blue, a little bit of a brighter blue. And this is probably the only part I didn't like. It was very hard not to have to touch up the gray, and ended up having to do so, though with just 3 very slight color different or shade changes in the gray, it's not too hard to touch up. However, like getting near this trunk, the mold line is not as crisp. The mold difference between the trunk and the shirt slightly bends, and that means that paint will get there and it's kind of hard to get a straight line. Otherwise though, it is pretty easy, big surface area, not too bad. Next up is Druchii Violet, and this Druchii Violet I actually watered down. So this is about half Druchii Violet, half water, so it's not quite as thick. And I'm going to almost paint this on where I think shadow would be. Mind you, this is just kind of where I feel it should be and where I think it'll look nice. I am no expert when it comes to object source lighting or where lighting and shadow would lay or anything like that. And again, I'm sure to put some extra little bit, let it pool in those kind of deep recesses, and it'll just add a lot to it. And we're going to highlight later anyway, so just a little bit of color differentiation between dark, normal, and light helps a lot. Okay, and here's white again. So I added a little bit of white to the normal flat blue, and then I'm just kind of painting it on in a general spot. Now, always note that paint is brighter when wet because it's reflecting light, but once it dries, it will be darker. This is nice because you can see where you're highlighting. It's unfortunate because you can't really tell exactly how strong the highlight is until it is dried. In this case, I actually did pretty good, as you'll see later on, though it looks terrible when it's wet. And that's just kind of the nature of paint, and there's no real good way around it. You're just going to have to get a feel for what the highlight will look like once it dries. But again, just on that very raised edge, and then a little bit on the folds. And now we're mixing a 3-part white gray to 1-part Emperor's Children. You do not need a lot of pink in here. This is for the inside of the ears. And this, again, is actually very easy, easier than the shirt when it comes to painting it. Though there is kind of a ridge line around it where the back of the ear folds in. And painting that with the pink, I chose to do it with the pink and not the gray, is a little finicky. So again, this is real time, just trying to be careful using just the tip of my brush and sticking it in there. I mess up a little bit here, right here, but it's not too bad. In fact, I think it still looks pretty darn good and easy to touch up if you so choose. Alright, next up is just straight up buff, and this is for the meat mallet handle. Now this part right here where it goes into the stuffy, I found kind of odd. I guess it's the only way you could signify that he's holding it, but the way it goes into his back is kind of odd too. And also, I apologize for the camera angle. I know it's been a little blurry, and I lose a little bit of footage. This is the last video you will see at this angle. The Rising Sun ones I've actually done after I filmed this, and so you've seen kind of the better angle where it's not quite as blurry, a little bit farther away, but you can still see what I'm doing. So I do apologize for that. Next up, we have Stormhost Silver, and this is going to be on the actual meat grinder part of this mallet here. And we're going to darken up with Nuln Oil and then call it a day, so not too bad here. I also lost the film for the Seraphim Sepia that I added into the ridges of the mallet, so be sure to do that as well. Now around this ridge here, just notice I'm being very, very careful, and eventually I take the base off, or the handle off right there, just to get the bottom of those ridges as well. Okay, and here is the promised Nuln Oil. Again, just make sure you put it directly into the ridges, you know, just kind of a cross hatch of it, you know, back and forth, and then wipe along the edges, and you should be good. Next up is Steel Legion Drab, and this is for the stitching. So I watered this down a bit too much. I would suggest you don't water it down a terrible amount. You just end up having to go over it again. Though the stitching is quite raised, very easy to do. Just make sure you get the sides, or you're going to get these tips of gray that you don't want. Next up are the eyes, and we're doing that with Abaddon Black and Mechanicus Standard Gray. And this is a 1-to-1 mix, and it just makes it a slightly off black that I think looks really good. A pure black, I think, with eyes this big would look really creepy, and this matches the concept art too, which is kind of nice. Again, very easy ridge line there between the eye and the face. It just naturally guides the brush, super easy to do. And then we're going to follow up with just Mechanicus Standard Gray, very watered down as if we're doing a highlight, and that's just add a little spot on the tips of the eyes to give them a little bit of a shine. Alright, light green blue, we are now onto the base. It was that easy. And this is just going to be all the way around the base. I'm being fairly careful, but I'm using a regiment brush, but it's really easy to dodge his feet, and really his feet are really small, and other than that, the base is free for you to quickly paint. So this is a very quick step. Now for the ridge of the base, I always paint it with the side of the brush, like this. I've seen a lot of people paint it long way, though I find that pools paint on the top and bottom of the ridge, and so I think this gives a nice even coat, and the paint is held well. Alright, moving on to some really watered down white gray. Now I'm going to hand draw some papers and colored crayons and some scribble on the base, just to go back to the concept art where it kind of shows this spilled out onto the floor. The reason I watered it down so much is because, again, this is my second time ever freehanding anything, and I feel if it's this watered down, I can slowly build it up, kind of like when you sketch and you don't draw really dark lines, and I can erase it easily and just kind of pretend it never happened. But I actually ended up doing fairly well, though I feel I probably would have been more nervous with much thicker paint. Also, I wanted to be fairly flat, but I ended up having to do a lot of layers as well to really get a good coat. So whichever you prefer, but that's why I watered it down like this. Make sure to get the proportion right as well. Alright, the first color will be Evil Sunz Scarlet, so we're just going to do some red. So I'm just going to draw a little kind of, some kind of coloring utensil, and then some scribble on this paper here. I don't know what it is they're drawing, they're just having fun on it. And this is even an unclean brush, and I liked it because it would add a little bit of oddness to it. Flash Gitz Yellow is the next one, and this is again just adding some scribble right on top, very quick and easy to do. And lastly, I'm going to add Violet. Just 3 colors, I think that's good. Red, yellow, purple, pretty nice there. And again, just a little bit of splotchiness on both pictures. And that is really it. Of course, I always matte varnish my miniatures so we can pick them up on the table. And this is the final miniature. This is pretty much what he looks like, actually. This is not too bad. I mean, this is really close and some harsh lighting, but I think the shadow effect looks well, the highlight's subtle, but it's there. All around, I'm really happy with how he turned out, and the kids are very excited to play with him again. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I enjoyed making it for you guys. Next time, I will be painting Rising Sun, so look forward to that. If you're not already subscribed and you are enjoying these videos and are looking forward to more, please consider subscribing. If you would like to support the channel, you can do that many ways. You can do that with a thumbs up. You can do that with just a comment of encouragement. You can do that by visiting my Patreon. In fact, on Patreon, I have some new goals up where if I hit $10 per month, that's not a whole lot. You could do that with 1 person, or maybe just 10 of you for $1. I will be giving away a miniature to those Patreons, so if you want to be part of that, go ahead and head over there now. But either way, guys, thanks so much for watching. I always appreciate it, and I'll talk to you again soon.